Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /EntitledPeople, where people truly think it's all about them and no one else matters. And in today's episode, there is nothing more satisfying than Karens calling cops on someone only to have it backfire. We've got raging customers, thieving workers, self-entitled politicians all getting taught lessons in this one, guys. So sit back, grab a drink, and remember, this voice is only on the Dark Fluff YouTube channel, nowhere else. So a few years back, I had a small 2-bedroom apartment in a very old building, in which you could hear everything. My bedroom was right next to the wall of my neighbor's, who happened to be a 27-year-old male. Now, this guy was a stupid lunatic. He always played video games until 4 or 5 a.m. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That wasn't the lunatic part. What was the lunatic part is he had some kind of problem with losing. Every time he would lose, he would start rage screaming, throwing things around, punching the wall, waking me up almost every night. And at the time, I was doing 2 jobs and I needed every second of sleep I could get. Now, I did try talking to him many times, but nothing helped. One time, when I was out for work, I even left my sound system on, running a mix of artillery and machine gun barrages just to show him how annoying this stuff could be. But as entitled people are, it didn't do any good. Fast forward a few months and nothing improved, and I was getting crazy about this. One Saturday night, I had a poker game running with a few friends, and my neighbor was having one of his usual tantrums. Since I had guests over, we just turned up the music to drown him out. Everybody listened to something different, so there was a good mix of death metal, techno, industrial, and hardcore. My neighbor was furious at some point, and apparently, the guy called the police to file a noise complaint on us. Luckily, when they pull up, one of my guys saw them driving up as he was out for a quick cigarette, and here comes the fun. We turned the music down before they came up, so when they rang the doorbell, I opened and they couldn't hear anything noisy, just a few guys having some beer and a little poker game. The cops said there was a noise complaint from a neighbor, saying it was way too loud and that this was something constant. We just told them we've been like this for hours. And this is when I had a genius idea. I asked them if my neighbor called them, which of course they couldn't answer. So I invite the 2 cops inside and I told them that I would show them what a real noise disturbance looks like. I'd lead them to my bedroom and the timing couldn't have been more perfect. The guy was throwing tantrums and smacking the wall. I told the cops the whole story, and since they were already here, I said I would like to file a noise complaint against him. The cops were actually shocked at how much noise you could hear from the other side. They went directly to him to tell him to shut the heck up, and that he would get reprimanded by written letter to keep the noise down, and to not call the police for false emergencies. I had a huge laugh as the cops came back to tell me to call them if he ever did something like this again, because in that case, I would be able to file charges. So long story short, this a-hole thought police would shut me down, but instead, it was the other way around. I've never slept better than that night, and finally, I had some peace at home. Talk about self-entitlement, right? Like if you're always screaming and being loud, you can't complain when neighbors want to hear their music. Like, how dare you, dude? I'm just glad to know the cops talked to the guy and hopefully he learned a lesson. And this person comments, sounds like the guy in the apartment next to mine. We share a bedroom wall, and a couple of times a month, the guy just pounds on the wall in the middle of the night for absolutely no reason. He would scream obscenities while doing it. It's quite jarring since it usually happens when we're asleep, and it's forceful enough that it shakes the pictures and the other stuff hanging above the bed on the wall. And if you thought that post was satisfying, we're only getting started. This next post, a nasty Karen mother-in-law learns a lesson. So this is my father's story, and it's quite a funny one. So when I was born, my father was stationed out in California and we were living in military housing. This will be important. My grandparents on mother's side drove all the way from out of state to help my parents for a few weeks, since they were new to balancing children and work. Now, father and grandmother have always had a rocky at best relationship. One time, she hit him with her van intentionally to, quote, teach him a lesson. Grandmother was also super entitled, and as long as she was around, everything had to go her way. Well, one day, my mom's at work and grandfather was out doing something. At the time, my parents had a Siberian husky named Bear. Well, my grandmother had recently read this article on why it's not safe to trust pets with newborns, as in the article, it talked about some animals being jealous of attention and they would end up attacking the baby. What ensued was a huge fight between my father and my grandmother about keeping the dog. As it was my father's best friend, the answer was a hard no from him. The argument turns into a "this is my house" sort of thing, which was when my grandmother threatens to call police to have my dad arrested for child safety issues. Grandmother also has a habit of calling police when she didn't get her way, so this was nothing new. On this day, my father had enough. As soon as she said, "I'll call the police," my father gives her a smug look and he said, "I dare you to call them," and then walked off. Well, grandmother calls the police. And keep in mind, it's a military base, so the police that showed up were armed military police. They proceed to do the normal describe the incident type of thing. Now, my dad's a clever guy. He immediately told them, "We got into a little disagreement and I dared her to call the police because she doesn't like my dog, so here we are." Meanwhile, grandmother the whole time was apparently trying to get police to side with her on the matter, and she even asked the cops to make my father give up the dog. Well, it's not legal for an adult to call the police on a dare, and upon finding out from my father that she's done this many times before, they weren't too fond of the matter. So to teach grandmother a lesson, they take her into custody and put her in a cell. When my mom got off of work, they resolved the whole thing. And they didn't mark my grandmother's record or anything like that. But needless to say, my father and grandmother never talked again. So I work as a manager of a cell phone carrier store. One day, I had a lady that bought her phone at a Best Buy mobile location come into my store to do a return to get money back. I told her we can't accept it since she purchased it from a different retailer completely. We just can't do it. The woman put up a fight though, and she insisted we take the phone in. So I nicely explain that that's not possible, but the woman starts to yell and fake cry. It's cringy crying to where the other customers were trying not to laugh. I asked her to stop arguing, and I even went as far as to offer to call the store where she went to talk to their store manager to try to make this process as easy as possible for her to go there to return it. The woman refuses to have me call, still demanding I take the phone and give her a refund. This is when I say to her, "Hey, this is your last warning. I will call the cops if you don't leave right now." Hearing me say that, she sits down on the floor and she tells me, "Go ahead, call the police, I dare you. I'm not going anywhere." So of course I call police. They took their sweet time coming out because it wasn't an emergency. As the officer shows up and asks the customer what happened, she says that I was yelling at her and harassing her and wouldn't help her. A lot of customers just laughed, and some did feel bad because they thought she might have had issues. The officer asked her to leave, and this is when the woman goes, "I'm not leaving. You might as well trespass me because that's the only way I'm leaving the store without a stupid refund." The cops asked if I wanted to, and I agreed. Her suggestion, not mine. So she fills out the double carbon copy paper, and everyone gets one for records. On her way out though, she literally gets in my face and she goes, "And by the way, I'll have you know that I'm an attorney. You don't know who you're messing with." I wish I could go back and review the footage from that day. I had to file a security report since police were dispatched. And it would have been funny to watch a woman sit down on the floor for 45 minutes while waiting for police to arrive. I also wonder what the customers' first impressions were seeing this lady just sitting right inside of the front doors and blocking customers from being helped at the workstation. Yeah, how many of you actually think that woman was an attorney? Like, if she was, she might not be a good one. And I'm only saying that because common sense, right? Like, you can't buy something from Walmart and then go to Best Buy and demand a return. And being an attorney, I'm assuming at the very least she would have known that. And this next post, a smug elected official gets a little bit too entitled and learns a lesson. So several years ago, I worked for a security company that was contracted to watch over a new construction site for a large wind farm. This area was hilly terrain with lots of wind, perfect for this kind of project. It was also popular with hunters, both local and not. The property had an old dirt road running through it that had been previously open to anyone wanting to use it, and this part becomes more important later. I had been working this site since they broke ground on construction, and we never had any issues, until a roll of copper wire was stolen. Our company had assumed that anyone trying to do anything on that site would use the heavily improved road through the site. They were proven wrong when that spool went out the back road. The only other access road that met up behind the property was nearly impassable for anything but four-wheel drive trucks, so it had been considered unimportant beforehand. Needless to say, we moved to 2 guards minimum overnight, one at the main entrance and one patrolling the site. The other change was the company who owned the project decides to require every person entering the site to have a badge identifying them. Due to the popularity with hunters, it did create some issues, due to this road now being the smoothest and quickest way to the back side of the property. The hunters would come and go, but the people who owned the cabins behind the property were more regularly seen throughout the year. It was one of these owners that became the biggest problem. This one guy was proud to flaunt the office he previously held, and he was adamant that he had an easement to drive through this property to get to his. It may be different in other areas, but here, an easement, which is the ability to drive through someone else's property, is given if there's no alternative route available. With there being a road that led out to the public roads from the back of the property we were guarding, this wasn't the case here. The company we were contracted with was actually reasonable with allowing access. They just need some identification. For this particular individual, that wasn't good enough. The guy makes a routine of speeding past the guards, refusing to stop. So a gate was installed and it was kept shut. One of the other guards let us know that the guy was trying to get a ticket or get arrested so he could take the owner to court. My luck would have it that he chose one of my shifts to run the gate. This shift being a midday on Sunday, with the crew having come in for some overtime to fix something. With all of that in mind, this gentleman drives up and he starts yelling about accessing his property. We have his picture, so I knew who he was. I pretended not to hear him, clearly giving me enough time to start closing the gate in front of him. As I start shutting the gate, the guy starts driving forward. So I stop and I stand in front of his truck and I let the gate swing back open. He then tells me to move out of his way or he would run me over. Seeing that I have the advantage, the guy tries a different approach. He makes a comment saying, "Fine, you want to play this game? I have all the time in the world. I'll block this road." I just bluffed a little, telling him about the crew working on site, and I said I wouldn't do anything about it, but since they're on overtime on a weekend, I wouldn't stop them from doing what they needed to be able to go home, which led to him pushing to get the police involved. Now this is where it gets good. I was given explicit instructions to not call the police on him, because all that was wanted was for him to come back during the week to get a pass, which I told him repeatedly to no avail. The guy just kept pushing and pushing to get police called, which I kind of started to find funny the more he talked about it. He went from simply saying that I should call them to more in-depth pushing, goading me into calling the cops. He then asked if we had a phone in the shack, which we didn't. He asked if I had a cell phone, which I lied, and I said I don't have one on me. So not ready to give up, the guy takes it upon himself to call the sheriff's department on himself. Satisfied that the police were on their way, the guy moves his vehicle aside, and he allowed me to shut the gate. It was about 30 minutes before the first deputy arrives, since it was a weekend. Being the security guard, they approached me first. I told them what happened, and neither my company nor the property owner had an issue with him or what he was doing, as he was outside the gate and not blocking anything. The officer just shook his head about this guy calling them in himself, and he walked over to talk to the guy. The crew that was working came down, and they asked what's going on, and they had a quick laugh before heading home. All in all, about 5 officers responded to this call, and each one gets a laugh about getting a call like this one. It must have been a slow day for them to have so many show up for a joke call like this, and then taking another half hour to 45 minutes deciding on how to handle it. In the end, they gave him a ticket for falsely reporting a crime or something along those lines. To which I hear him yelling out his window as he drives off that he got his day in court. The officers who have yet to leave start laughing, and they said, yeah, he'll get his day in court, but it's not gonna be the one he thinks he's getting. Yeah, some people just have way too much time on their hands, and they're a little bit too self-entitled. Like the fact that the guy wanted the cops to come ticket him to prove that he suffered damages so he can go to court about it. Like, get a hobby. I really wish OP could update us on how things ended, but with the ticket having nothing to do with the company he was trying to fight in court, I only wish I could see his smug face turn into a shocked Pikachu face. So my usually not irresponsible teenager lost his phone, and just realized it while competing in a track meet he was invited to. I had my daughter use her Find My Phone app to see it at a local convenience store. I refreshed the search to see that it was hovering around the space of the store and the parking lot, almost back and forth between 2 locations. So I tell my daughter that I'm taking their phone with me to the store to retrieve it. I arrive through the doors, phone in hand, like I'm on a time scavenger hunt. The clerk suddenly gets shifty, looking at me, then looking away, and then looking at his customer. Understandable with how I entered. I then jump in line, patiently waiting for the customer in front of me to interview the clerk about the state lottery system, which is a barrage of ridiculous questions that I couldn't even write up. Finally, it's my turn, and now I'm the only customer in here. I also notice that upon refreshing the app I was using, the phone hasn't moved since I entered the store. I then begin with what would be a line of my own questions. I ask the clerk, hey, my son lost his iPhone, and this app says it's near here. Has anybody turned in a phone? The lying clerk says, nope, no phone here. I retort and I say, can you look around because I've refreshed this over and over the past 20 minutes and it's here. Liar McLiarstein continues his poorly spun web of lies. And he says, I don't know anything about this phone, man, so quit bothering me. You lost your phone, so get over it. I then respond, dude, it's here, where's my phone? He then says, if you want to make it a whole thing, go ahead, call the cops, see what they do. And I respond, okay, let's do that. Now, I know I can ping the phone to make noise, but I don't know if he's got it in his car, in the back room, or somewhere I can't go without getting arrested, like behind the counter. Realizing that, I call the cops and I explain the situation as well as my suspicions. The police ask what app I used, if it's active, and if I have any more evidence that it's in his possession. I explain I don't want to ping it yet until they can help. They agreed to send a car out. I just wait outside next door, out of his line of sight, hoping he was convinced I left. Not too long after, the police arrive, and I flag them to me showing him the app. They also took my ID, which was weird, but whatever. We end up entering the store together as I ping the phone. The phone's going off now, and it's loud. We find it in his office, and the guy answers some questions as he gets handcuffed. I didn't press charges, and to those who are wondering why I didn't press charges, I felt I didn't need to. The employee getting fired for getting arrested was enough, and I also believe in second chances. So I'm a college kid who works part-time as a private security officer on a graveyard shift. I mostly do bicycle patrol, which means I'm riding from client property to client property, doing nightly checks as opposed to sitting at a desk. One night, I ride up to one of my properties and I see that there's a trespasser in the back corner of the parking lot. As I get closer, I can see that it's an elderly guy with a walker and the guy has his pants down. I of course politely inform him that he's trespassing on private property and the guy needs to move. He replies that he's stuck, and then he demands I help him get his pants back on. His expression and tone make it pretty darn blatant that he's saying this because I'm a female security guard. Now, corporate says we're not allowed to provide medical assistance under any circumstances anyways. So I tell him, no, I'm not allowed to do that. And hearing me say that, he completely loses his mind at being told no. The guy just starts screaming that I'd better help him with his pants or he's gonna call the police on me. I tell him I'll be happy to involve the police and proceed to inform him that he's now officially excluded from the property. We're supposed to tell every trespasser that because it's a legally binding notice of trespass. But we usually don't because going off on a multi-paragraph legal spiel is really annoying and it tends to escalate situations. But the guy said he wanted police, and that means I'm gonna do everything by the book and write a full report. Needless to say, the guy gets madder and madder as I go through all the legally required points for exclusion and then call police. It's at this point, the guy loses it and throws a tantrum. He's spewing completely uncreative insults that every security officer's heard 1,000 times already. I politely inform him that police are on the way, and that he'll likely be arrested for criminal trespass if he's still here when they arrive. The guy then doubles down and he screams more insults at me, to which I think, whatever, have it your way. A police officer then arrives, faster response than usual for non-emergency. It's an officer that I've met before. I point out the trespasser and I state for the record that he's been formally excluded. The guy then demands that she arrest me for harassing him, and then goes off on her when she points out that I'm doing my job and he's trespassing. I also want to note that the local police are very reluctant to actually arrest anyone for trespassing. It's a lot of paperwork for what's ultimately a trivial misdemeanor offense. Legally speaking, if security's already issued an exclusion, the police can make an immediate arrest for criminal trespass without giving the person any further chance to leave, but they pretty much never do this. They will give trespassers every opportunity to just pack it up and leave quietly, which is fine with us because we don't want to do more paperwork either. But on this day, this guy was stubborn enough to actually get arrested. You know, just like the other stories, I just don't get how somebody can be so wrong, yet be so confident. What was that guy's endgame here? Like he was given multiple chances to walk away, yet he kept pushing and pushing to the point of going to jail. And for all who are wondering, the guy did have his pants down the entire time, arrest and all, according to OP. Some people, right? So I work for a water company, carrying out repairs on burst water mains, and I work on an on-call basis of 1 week every 2 months. This one particular job happened about 8 years ago. So we get a call out that a major pipe feeding a large housing estate had burst, and it needs repairs as soon as possible. We head to the yard at about 11 at night to collect our gear and get the plans and drawings of other utilities in the area of work. We arrive on site, set up the traffic management as per regulations, and speak with the inspector that called us out for an exact location of repair. We set up our barriers and work lights around the area. We then get out the steel saw and we cut a couple of meters of tar out, ready to start breaking the tar out of the road. Well, just as I start jackhammering, Mr. Sleepyhead comes stomping down the street in his slippers and dressing gown, and the guy's looking pissed. I took my ear protection off to see what he wanted. And spoiler, it wasn't to offer us a coffee. The guy then proceeds to tell me, "Shut the effing thing off, and F off until it's daytime, idiot." This is when I explain it was emergency work and we can't have 600 properties get up and have no water in the morning, so it's gotta be completed right now. And our work was fully understood by the council and the police. We then get the usual BS of "Do you know who I am?" To which I refrained from telling him that I knew exactly who he is. He's an irritating a-hole who is stopping us from working. The guy then starts turning off the air supply so I can't jackhammer, which was ever so slightly annoying. When that didn't stop us, he starts saying that he knows the police chief inspector, and he would have me arrested if I kept working. I said I have to carry on as per my emergency work order, and if he carried on obstructing us, I would have no choice but to call police to get the job finished. Well, this guy wasn't giving up. He shuts off the air supply again, and the guy starts swearing at me, and he said, "Call who you like. I'll have you arrested and sacked by the morning." By now, I was tired, cold, and wet, and I was getting slightly irritated by his actions. So I do call the cops. I go back to the van and I call the police. I explain that we're out doing emergency work and we're being prevented from completing it by one of the local residents. And then I explain what he's doing to stop us working. The guy stomps off in his now soggy slippers and I pour a coffee. About 40 minutes later, lights appear in the distance, so I thought, great, just what we need so we can get done and recharged by 6 a.m. Hopefully. Mr. Sergeant and Mr. Constable arrive and they come for a chat. They find out what's going on and, in his words, why we're doing it after midnight in the first place. So I proceed to explain that the water main had burst and we need to get the supply restored by 6 a.m. to save between 1,500 to 2,000 people having no water in the morning when they get up. So being a man with common sense, he then realized the job needed to be done, and he walks off to have a word with Mr. Sleepyhead. Before long, we can hear the shouting from down the street. It then goes quiet, and he comes back down to us to explain that that guy was a sandwich short of a picnic, which is the British euphemism for a nut job, and they're gonna have to hang around just in case Mr. Sleepyhead starts playing stupid games. So we fire up the compressor and we start jackhammering again with my back towards the police car to save anything pinging off in that direction. A few minutes later, the machine driver toots his horn to get my attention. Mr. Sleepyhead had come down the road and the guy was carrying a piece of lumber. To do what with, I don't know. The guy was in the process of getting arrested for disturbing the peace. I honestly laughed so hard I got cramps. Like, who the heck is that stupid when police are around? And just in case anyone's interested, we were back on by 5:30 a.m. And the best part is Mr. Sleepyhead's neighbor offers us a coffee. He then told me that he was highly amused because he'd been feuding with this guy for months. He had seen the whole incident out his window, and his only disappointment was his surveillance cameras didn't pick up the video, and he only had the audio to share with his friends. So yeah, I hope he learned a lesson, and the other best part is that the guy was so sure that he'd have me arrested, but he gets himself locked up instead. Yeah, I am definitely with OP on this one when they say Mr. Sleepyhead wasn't the smartest. Like, who tries to pull a wild stunt like that when there are cops around? And I also want to say that I love sleep as much as the next person, but I also understand that sometimes workers do have to respond to emergencies, and it might interrupt my sleep, but what can you do, right? I'll tell you what I wouldn't do though. I wouldn't charge at the workers with a frickin' 2x4. That said, I love how the feuding neighbor offers OP a coffee and was laughing at his idiot neighbor getting arrested. Talk about karma. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy, crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/malicious compliance episode, where bad bosses are getting taught lessons they won't forget. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.